Just 3 minutes ago, in a move no one saw coming, Princess Anne allegedly slammed the doors both literal and symbolic on Queen Camilla's attempt to access one of the monarchy's most guarded treasures, the royal art collection. No announcement. No warning. Just a cold, calculated block that sent shockwaves through palace corridors. What could possibly be inside those walls that forced Anne's hand so abruptly? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The timing is what makes this moment detonate. Not yesterday, not last week, 3 minutes ago. An intervention so immediate it felt like instinct, but those who know Princess Anne understand that instinct is rarely impulsive. Palace insiders whisper that Camilla arrived expecting routine clearance, the kind that comes with quiet authority and unquestioned status. Instead, she was reportedly met with a barrier that had not existed hours earlier. Access codes revised, security briefed, orders signed with decisive clarity, and behind it all, Anne's name. This was no casual misunderstanding. The Royal Art Collection is not a decorative gallery for polite admiration. It is the monarchy's silent archive, centuries of portraits that have watched alliances rise and collapse, frames that conceal correspondence, brushstrokes that echo private grief and calculated ambition. Some pieces are celebrated publicly, others are whispered about privately. Control over such a collection is not simply curatorial, it is narrative power. Whoever stands before those canvases holds influence over how history is remembered or reinterpreted. Anne's reputation casts a long shadow over this confrontation. She is disciplined, controlled, relentlessly loyal to the traditions shaped by Queen Elizabeth II. When she acts, it is rarely emotional. It is strategic. Those within the institution describe her as a guardian of continuity, someone who sees the monarchy not as a stage for reinvention, but as a structure built on sacred inheritance. So if she intervened at the very moment Camilla sought entry, it suggests more than protocol. It suggests protection. And then there is the silence. Buckingham Palace has offered nothing. No clarification. No denial. Just a stillness that feels heavier than any statement could. In royal politics, silence is rarely accidental. It can shield, it can threaten, it can buy time. But it also amplifies speculation. Staff members are said to have received last-minute instructions, altering access privileges under Anne's authority. That kind of swift procedural shift does not happen without reason. It signals urgency, perhaps even alarm. Why would Camilla need immediate access? Why would Anne feel compelled to stop her? These are not questions about etiquette. They are questions about trust, about legacy, about who shapes the story told to the world, and who decides which chapters remain untouched. The Royal Art Collection may appear timeless and serene, but beneath its polished frames lies tension that has simmered quietly for years, because this was not simply a door being closed. It was a line being drawn. And if a line has been drawn, then it means there was something worth defending on one side, and something worth pursuing on the other. But this wasn't simply about paintings and portraits, it was about power. And to understand the magnitude of Anne's decision, we must first confront what the Royal Art Collection truly represents. Behind velvet ropes and climate-controlled vaults lies more than priceless artwork. It's a visual diary of triumphs, betrayals, alliances, and secrets. The Royal Art Collection is whispered to contain pieces never displayed publicly, images that could reshape narratives long believed settled. If Camilla sought access now, the timing cannot be coincidence. And if Anne blocked her, it means something inside those halls carries explosive weight. What the public sees during carefully curated exhibitions is only a fraction of the story. Beneath the celebrated masterpieces and ceremonial portraits exists a quieter archive, private commissions that were never meant for open admiration. These works are said to capture moments of tension within the monarchy, silent power shifts frozen in oil and canvas, a raised eyebrow in a portrait, a shadow placed too deliberately behind a sovereign figure. Art that, to the untrained eye, appears regal but to insiders, feels almost coded. And in a family where appearances are everything, even a brushstroke can be political. There are murmurs that some of these pieces trace back to delicate eras surrounding Queen Elizabeth II's inner circle. Not scandals splashed across headlines, but private fractures, alliances formed in whispers, loyalties tested behind closed doors. It is believed that certain paintings subtly memorialize those fractures, embedding unspoken truths within symbolic detail. For decades, those works remained untouched, preserved not only for their artistic value, but for the stories they silently safeguard. In the monarchy, memory is sacred, but it is also dangerous. More unsettling still are the rumors of correspondence hidden within the art itself. Letters sealed behind backing panels, notes tucked into frames before they were fastened, royal communication disguised as aesthetic preservation. Whether legend or reality, the idea persists that the royal art collection is more than a gallery, it is an encrypted archive. And access to such an archive means access to context, to motive, to explanation. Whoever studies it closely may not just see history, they may reinterpret it. This is where the stakes sharpen. Control over the collection is not merely administrative, it is narrative dominance. The monarchy survives on continuity, on the careful shaping of public memory. If Camilla sought private review, some believe it may have been tied to image preservation, perhaps a desire to ensure her chapter within royal history is framed with balance rather than controversy. Others suggest something bolder, reinterpretation, a subtle shift in how certain periods are presented to the world, a recalibration of legacy. But to Anne, such recalibration may feel like erosion. She is widely regarded as a guardian of institutional memory, fiercely loyal to the version of the monarchy she believes was entrusted to her by her mother. To her, altering context could mean unraveling a delicate thread that has held the institution steady through decades of scrutiny. And once altered, history cannot simply be restored. Once a narrative shifts, it rarely shifts back. That is why this confrontation feels less like disagreement and more like collision. Two visions of legacy, two philosophies of preservation. One seeking access, perhaps to protect or reshape. The other standing firm, perhaps to defend what must remain untouched. The royal art collection may appear still and silent, but within its vaults, the past hums with consequence. And that raises the question no one dares to ask openly: what exactly was Camilla searching for when Anne stepped in? Sources claim Camilla's request wasn't casual, it was urgent, deliberate, and framed as time-sensitive. She reportedly sought private viewing privileges, bypassing standard advisory review. Why the rush? Why now? And why did Anne react as though something sacred was under threat? This wasn't a simple scheduling conflict. It felt personal, strategic, and perhaps defensive. Within royal systems, nothing moves without layers of consultation. Committees advise, private secretaries assess, councils review implications. Yet this request, according to whispers circulating behind closed doors, did not follow that familiar path. It arrived with urgency attached to it, as though delay itself posed a risk. That alone raised eyebrows. When hierarchy is as carefully balanced as it is within the monarchy, transparency is protection. To move without it is to signal intent. And intent, in this case, has become the center of speculation. The timing is impossible to ignore. Public conversations around royal hierarchy have been shifting. Questions about relevance, succession optics, and personal legacy have intensified in recent months. Camilla, once viewed through a narrow lens of controversy, has gradually reshaped her public image with calculated patience. She has endured scrutiny and re-emerged composed. But with visibility comes vulnerability. And perhaps, some suggest, the desire to ensure that the past is presented in a way that does not reopen wounds carefully stitched closed. There are murmurs that certain pieces within the royal art collection touch subtly on her pre-royal narrative. Portraits commissioned during transitional years. Artistic interpretations of moments that, at the time, stirred quiet unrest. Nothing explicit, nothing accusatory, but symbolic enough that context matters. If Camilla sought to examine those works privately, it may not have been vanity, it may have been strategy. To understand how one is framed within history is to understand how one will be remembered. Advisors reportedly debated the implications. Granting such access could establish precedent. If one senior royal can privately review and potentially influence contextual presentation, others might seek similar privilege. The monarchy thrives on consistency. Even perceived favoritism can destabilize trust within its own structure. What begins as a personal request can quickly become institutional tension. And in that tension, lines begin to harden. Anne's intervention did more than deny access, it overruled multiple internal voices. That detail is telling. It suggests resistance, perhaps even quiet disagreement, before her decisive command settled the matter. When she stepped in, it was not hesitant. It was firm, final. And in that firmness was an unmistakable message: some doors remain closed for a reason. Perhaps most revealing, according to insiders, was Camilla's reaction. Known for measured composure, she reportedly faltered when informed of the denial. Not dramatically, not publicly, but enough to unsettle those present. A brief pause. A tightness in tone. The controlled exterior momentarily strained. That subtle crack has fueled speculation more than any official statement could. Because in royal life, emotion rarely surfaces without cause. This was not merely about art. It was about perception, about authorship of legacy, about who has the authority to interpret the monarchy's most delicate chapters. Camilla's urgency suggests stakes she understood deeply. Anne's refusal suggests stakes she believed even higher. And when two powerful figures see the same archive through different lenses, conflict becomes inevitable. But Anne's refusal didn't emerge from nowhere. It may have been brewing beneath the surface for years. Princess Anne has never been known for impulsive decisions. Her loyalty to the late Queen Elizabeth II was unwavering, her devotion to duty almost ascetic. So if she intervenes so decisively, it suggests calculation, not reaction. Some insiders claim this moment traces back decades, to silent tensions that were never fully resolved. To understand the weight of her refusal, you have to understand the foundation she stands on. Anne was not merely a daughter of a sovereign, she was a disciple of a system. She absorbed its codes, its silences, its unspoken rules. While others adapted to modern optics, she remained anchored in continuity. That alignment with her mother's legacy grants her a kind of moral authority within palace walls that few dare to challenge. When Anne speaks in defense of tradition, it is not perceived as opinion, it is perceived as stewardship. And stewardship in this case may be the key. The Royal Art Collection was said to be one of Queen Elizabeth II's quiet passions. Not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented: endurance. Each piece a fragment of rain survived, storms weathered, transitions managed with careful precision. For Anne, protecting that archive may feel less like policy and more like promise. A promise to safeguard the monarchy's memory exactly as it was entrusted to her. There have long been rumors of subtle friction between Anne and Camilla. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic enough to headline tabloids. But tension does not always roar, it often hums. Differences in temperament. Differences in philosophy. Camilla's path into the monarchy was complex, layered with scrutiny and eventual acceptance. Anne's path was linear, forged in birthright and discipline. One navigated entry, the other embodied continuity. Those contrasting journeys create different sensitivities, especially when legacy becomes the subject. Among palace staff, Anne's protective instinct over royal heritage is legendary. She is known to question alterations, to scrutinize proposals that even hint at revising historical context. To her, the past is not material to be reshaped, it is a record to be preserved. And when Camilla's request surfaced, particularly under urgent framing, it may have triggered more than administrative concern. It may have felt like encroachment on sacred ground. Blocking access, then, becomes symbolic. Not a rejection of Camilla personally, but a declaration of boundaries. A signal that some inheritances are not negotiable. That certain vaults are not merely physical spaces but repositories of trust. If Anne believes that trust was placed in her hands by her mother, stepping aside would not feel diplomatic, it would feel like betrayal. Perhaps most telling is what followed. Silence. No clarification. No defensive explanation. Anne has offered nothing publicly since the alleged confrontation. And in a world where narratives are often managed within hours, that silence carries force. It suggests certainty. It suggests conviction. It suggests that in her mind, the decision requires no justification. But silence can also be read as distance, as unresolved tension resurfacing after years of polite coexistence. And if this moment truly traces back decades, then it means the art collection was not the beginning of conflict, it was the flashpoint. And yet, this confrontation isn't just about the past, it's about who shapes the monarchy's future narrative. In monarchies, control of history is control of destiny. Whoever influences how the past is displayed shapes how the future is perceived. If Camilla sought to reinterpret certain pieces, and Anne resisted, then this is more than disagreement, it's a war over memory itself. The royal art collection is not confined to private corridors, it travels. Selected works are loaned to galleries, showcased during state visits, referenced in official publications. Each exhibition is a message, each curated wall a subtle declaration of identity. Through art, the monarchy projects stability, continuity, refinement. It reinforces alliances without speaking a word. That is soft power at its most elegant heritage presented as harmony. But harmony is curated, and curation is choice. Choice means someone decides what is seen and what remains in shadow. If certain paintings were repositioned, if contextual plaques were revised, if symbolic interpretations were gently reframed, the ripple effect would stretch far beyond the gallery. International audiences would absorb the shift. Commentators would interpret nuance. Public perception would slowly recalibrate. A monarchy does not need to announce change when it can suggest it through legacy. Some believe Camilla understands that subtle influence. She has spent years reshaping her own image, transitioning from controversy to composed authority. That transformation did not happen by accident. It required patience, resilience, and strategic awareness. If she viewed elements within the collection that reflect turbulent chapters of royal history, perhaps she saw opportunity not to erase, but to modernize, to contextualize, to ensure that narratives once framed through conflict are now presented with balance. In a rapidly evolving world, adaptation can feel like survival. Anne, however, embodies a different philosophy. To her, preservation is strength. Reinvention risks instability. The monarchy's power lies in its continuity, in the sense that what was entrusted remains intact. Adjusting historical framing even subtly could feel like loosening a cornerstone. Where Camilla may see evolution, Anne may see erosion. Where one envisions forward motion, the other safeguards stillness. Neither perspective is careless. Both are rooted in loyalty. And that is what makes the clash so charged. Within palace walls, advisors are said to have quietly divided. Not publicly, not dramatically, but in tone, in emphasis, in the advice they offered behind closed doors. Some argue that modernization protects relevance. Others insist that consistency protects legitimacy. The debate is not shouted, it is measured, cautious, strategic. Yet beneath that restraint, tension builds. Because once division enters advisory ranks, unity becomes performance rather than certainty. To the outside world, nothing appears fractured. Public engagements continue. Smiles remain composed. Appearances project solidarity. The monarchy has perfected the art of seamless presentation. But private conversations tell a different story. Fractures widen not through open rebellion but through subtle disagreement over direction, over legacy, over how the past should speak to the future. And this is where the stakes rise beyond personal rivalry. This is not merely about Anne and Camilla, it is about the trajectory of the institution itself. Will it anchor itself more firmly to tradition, resisting reinterpretation at all costs, or will it embrace strategic recalibration, adapting its historical narrative to a modern lens? The Royal Art Collection has become the symbolic battleground for that choice. Because when memory becomes contested territory, the outcome shapes more than exhibitions, it shapes identity. And identity, once reshaped, alters destiny. As tensions escalate behind closed doors, another figure quietly observes the unfolding drama. King Charles now finds himself between two formidable forces: his sister, fiercely loyal to tradition, and his wife, determined to secure her place in history. If he intervenes, he risks alienating one. If he remains silent, the divide deepens. And in a monarchy built on unity, visible cracks can become seismic. For decades, Charles has navigated conflict with caution. He prefers persuasion over confrontation, subtle alignment over decisive rupture. Even in moments of personal controversy, he has often chosen endurance rather than explosive rebuttal. That instinct to let storms pass rather than stand at their center has defined much of his public life. But this is different. This is not media criticism or political commentary. This is internal, intimate. A fracture between the woman who shared his childhood and the woman who shares his crown. His marriage to Camilla is not simply romantic, it is symbolic. It represents resilience, reinvention, and long-fought legitimacy. He stood beside her as public sentiment shifted, as criticism softened into cautious acceptance. To distance himself now, even subtly, would feel like undermining that shared journey. And yet, to openly support her in this confrontation would mean challenging Anne's sister, whose loyalty to the institution is unquestioned, whose influence runs deep through traditionalist circles within the palace. Anne's authority is not ceremonial. It is institutional. Senior staff respect her judgment. Advisors weigh her perspective heavily. She embodies continuity in a way few others can claim. If she has taken a firm stand regarding access to the royal art collection, it carries weight beyond personal disagreement. It signals conviction rooted in duty. Charles knows that. He also knows that ignoring her stance could fracture more than sibling harmony, it could unsettle internal confidence in his leadership. And then there is the undeniable truth. The royal art collection ultimately rests under sovereign oversight. The final authority, at least in theory, belongs to him. That reality transforms this from a dispute into a test. If he overturns Anne's block, it demonstrates decisive leadership but risks alienating traditionalists. If he upholds her decision, it protects institutional continuity, but may leave Camilla feeling isolated at a moment when she sought validation. Palace aides are said to be working relentlessly behind the scenes, attempting to contain rumors before they swell into narrative. Briefings are cautious. Language is measured. The goal is stability. Always stability. Yet containment is not resolution. It is delay. And delay can intensify tension, especially when the stakes are legacy. Charles stands at a crossroads shaped by personal loyalty and constitutional responsibility. He has spent a lifetime preparing for sovereignty, understanding that every decision carries symbolic consequence. This one may be smaller in scale than national policy, but its implications ripple through the monarchy's core. Authority is not merely declared, it is demonstrated. And how he responds, or chooses not to respond, will reveal where that authority truly rests. But perhaps the true weight of this conflict is not anchored solely in hierarchy or marital allegiance. Perhaps what ignited Anne's resistance and fueled Camilla's urgency is something far more specific. Something embedded within the collection itself. A single piece. A single chapter. A single detail capable of shifting perception in ways no public statement ever could. But the deeper truth may not lie in power politics, it may lie in something hidden within the art itself. What if there's one specific piece, one portrait, one sealed frame that triggered this entire confrontation? Insiders suggest a rarely viewed artwork connected to a delicate chapter of royal history has resurfaced in internal discussions. If Camilla sought to review it, and Anne blocked her, then the stakes may be far more personal than political. The rumors circle around a single portrait, whispered about for years but seldom acknowledged. It is said to depict a moment from a controversial era, an era when loyalties were questioned and the monarchy stood on fragile emotional ground. Not a scandal painted in obvious strokes, but something subtler. A composition layered with symbolism. A figure placed slightly apart. A gaze directed not at the viewer, but somewhere beyond the frame. Those who have studied it claim it captures tension without naming it. And tension, preserved in oil, does not fade with time. Speculation suggests that within the imagery lie references long debated by historians and advisors alike. Certain colors chosen deliberately. Certain objects positioned with intent. The portrait, according to palace lore, became a quiet subject of internal disagreement years ago. It was never destroyed. Never condemned. Simply removed from public display. Officially, the explanation was curatorial rotation. Unofficially, it was considered too sensitive for open interpretation. If that piece has indeed resurfaced in conversation, the timing feels anything but random. External scrutiny of royal history has intensified. Commentators revisit past narratives, reassessing figures once vilified or misunderstood. In that climate, even a single artwork can reignite dormant debates. If Camilla's request aligned with this renewed attention, it suggests foresight. Perhaps she sought to understand how the piece might be perceived should it ever re-emerge. Or perhaps she intended to ensure that its context, if revisited, would not lean toward implication. Anne's alleged response adds fuel to the fire. Insiders claim she invoked what are described as heritage protection clauses, internal safeguards designed to prevent alteration, removal, or reinterpretation of historically sensitive works without extensive review. That phrase alone carries gravity. It implies that the portrait is not just art, it is protected memory. By invoking such clauses, Anne would be signaling that the piece is beyond casual examination, that it stands as part of the monarchy's immutable record. And yet, the most powerful detail remains what no one has confirmed: the content itself. No official description. No sanctioned reproduction. The portrait's true imagery remains undisclosed. That silence has become fertile ground for speculation. What does it reveal? What does it suggest? Why was it removed from public view in the first place? The unknown fuels imagination, and imagination often travels faster than fact. If Camilla believed that reviewing the portrait was necessary to protect her standing, then her urgency begins to make sense. If Anne believed that allowing access would risk tampering literal or interpretive with a sensitive relic, her resistance becomes equally clear. In that clash of intention, the portrait transforms from canvas to catalyst. This is no longer abstract debate about legacy. It is focused, specific, personal. A single piece of art now sits at the center of a struggle that intertwines memory, reputation, and authority. And because its details remain hidden, its influence grows larger by the day. And as whispers spread beyond palace walls, the world begins to sense that something monumental is unfolding. The moment the rumor broke, social media erupted. Commentators questioned loyalties. Supporters picked sides. Yet from the palace, nothing. Silence can be strategic, but it can also signal internal fracture. If Anne's move was meant to protect the monarchy, it has instead exposed a rivalry few believed possible. Within hours, the narrative spiraled beyond private corridors and into public consciousness. Hashtags surged. Debate panels filled with speculation. Admirers of Anne praised her as a guardian of tradition, a steadfast defender of royal integrity unwilling to bend under pressure. They framed her decision as courageous, even necessary, a reminder that not every chapter of history is open to revision. To them, she stood as the last unyielding pillar of continuity in an era hungry for reinvention. But sympathy for Camilla grew just as quickly. Supporters argued that her request, whatever its purpose, should not have been met with what appeared to be a public rebuke. They questioned whether the denial reflected deeper exclusion rather than simple protocol. After years of navigating scrutiny and rebuilding public trust, this moment risked placing her once again on uncertain ground. For some, it felt like a reopening of old divides that had supposedly healed. Royal correspondents dissected recent appearances with forensic intensity. A glance held a fraction too long, a smile that seemed measured rather than spontaneous. The distance between Anne and Camilla during formal engagements suddenly became material for analysis. Every gesture was reinterpreted through the lens of rumored conflict. In a monarchy where symbolism matters, even posture can be read as message. International media seized upon the story with fascination. Across continents, headlines framed it as an internal power struggle, a battle over heritage at the heart of one of the world's most enduring institutions. The royal art collection, once a refined cultural treasure, transformed overnight into a global talking point. Commentators speculated about hidden portraits and buried correspondence, elevating the mystery to near mythic proportions. The more the palace remained silent, the louder the world became. And that silence is perhaps the most revealing element of all. No statement to calm the storm. No clarification to narrow the narrative. Just controlled composure. But composure does not erase curiosity. It magnifies it. The refusal to address the rumor has allowed it to breathe, to expand, to evolve beyond its origin. In trying to protect internal unity, the palace may have unintentionally exposed its fragility. Inside the institution, unity is being tested in ways rarely visible to the public. Advisors tread carefully. Communications teams craft language that says nothing while implying stability. Yet tension, once surfaced, does not disappear. It lingers in conversations. It shapes strategy. It forces alignment. Those who once operated seamlessly now navigate unspoken fault lines. What began as a denied request has grown into a symbolic confrontation, watched by millions. Anne's decisive block, Camilla's reported urgency, Charles's careful positioning all have merged into a single narrative. A monarchy at a crossroads between preservation and evolution. The art itself remains unseen, but its shadow stretches far beyond the vault. This is no longer a private disagreement contained within palace walls. It is a public drama unfolding in real time, testing not only relationships but perception. And perception, in a monarchy, can determine longevity. But as the dust refuses to settle, one question lingers: was this a temporary block, or the beginning of a permanent shift in royal power? 3 minutes ago, a door closed. But in monarchies, doors rarely close without consequences. Princess Anne's bold move may have protected something sacred or ignited a quiet revolution within palace walls. The art remains unseen. The motives remain debated. And the future of royal legacy hangs in delicate balance. What unfolded between Anne and Camilla is no longer just a dispute over access. It has become a symbol of something deeper, something generational. On one side stands preservation unyielding, disciplined, fiercely loyal to inherited codes. On the other stands evolution measured, strategic, aware that perception shapes survival. This confrontation exposes a tension that has long simmered beneath polished ceremonies and practiced unity. It is the tension between holding history exactly as it was and carefully reshaping it for what lies ahead. Access to heritage is never neutral. To stand before the monarchy's most sensitive archives is to stand before its identity. Whoever controls interpretation holds influence over legacy. And legacy, in an institution built on continuity, is everything. That is why this moment resonates so powerfully. It is not about a locked room. It is about who determines how the past speaks to the future. When Anne intervened, she was not merely denying entry, she was asserting guardianship. When Camilla sought review, she may have been seeking clarity, protection, perhaps even recalibration. Two intentions, two visions, one fault line. Now all eyes quietly turn to King Charles. His next step, whether decisive or restrained, could redefine how authority functions within the royal framework. If he reinforces Anne's stance, tradition tightens its grip. If he grants Camilla influence, evolution gains ground. Even continued silence will send a message. In monarchies, absence of action can be as powerful as decree. The balance he chooses will ripple far beyond this single incident. Yet anyone who believes this chapter has concluded underestimates resilience. Camilla has weathered storms that once seemed insurmountable. She understands patience. She understands timing. If she has been denied once, it does not guarantee retreat. It may simply signal recalculation. And Anne, in maintaining absolute silence, preserves strategic advantage. She speaks through action rather than commentary. That silence keeps control firmly in her grasp, allowing speculation to swirl while her position remains unshaken. Meanwhile, the royal art collection stands untouched, silent yet central. Its canvases do not argue. Its frames do not choose sides. And yet within those walls lies the heart of this struggle. History, sealed and safeguarded, waiting to be interpreted, waiting to be challenged, waiting to be defended. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandal, and reinvention. It understands endurance, but endurance depends on cohesion. If internal fractures widen, they will not erupt dramatically, they will shift quietly, gradually, redefining influence from within. What began as a single blocked request may mark the beginning of a subtle redistribution of power. The door may have closed, but the questions remain open. Was this a protective reflex born of loyalty, or the first unmistakable sign of a deeper realignment within the House of Windsor? Only time and perhaps the unseen art itself will reveal the answer. Because in the House of Windsor, history is never just preserved, it's fought over. Piece by piece, frame by frame. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.